Hello everyone in Cyber World, welcome back to another video. I'm Richard. My partner's not here, but she's Jennifer, and this is our channel we call Poor Man's DIY. So some of you are probably aware that in addition to YouTube, we actually have a little business, side business of woodworking, where we make wooden plaques and coat them with epoxy in general, but we do some other things. It's just for farewell gifts, presents, awards, and so forth that people order from us. Today what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to make a wooden challenge coin. Oftentimes in the military they have metal coins, and I've done this a couple times where I've made it out of wood. It seems to be doing well, and people order more. And so today we're going to be working on a coin that the Hawaii National Guard has requested I make. So let's get into this. And let me also explain that the idea behind this is to show you how I use my laser to engrave things and cut them out and then make these plaques. The idea on these videos that we're starting to do is to show you, and for those of you who'd like to make some things that are similar as gifts, or maybe even open a side business, hopefully this can help you out, and maybe you make something and we can watch from you what ideas that you have and learn from you and share it around and spread the knowledge to everybody else that would like to learn. Okay, we're going to start with an image that was provided to us, and ideally you would take this image, use it, load into some software for the laser cutter. In this particular case, we're going to be using Lightburn. Use a feature within Lightburn where you trace the image and it converts that image that you have into lines that are cut by the laser. Unfortunately, it's not a perfect science, so we're going to try and see what we can get from the image, and if we're lucky, it'll be a perfect image and we're ready to cut right away. But 99% of the time, it's okay, but I'm a little bit too nitpicky, so I use it as a base to redraw the entire logo, or much of the logo, and make it nice and clean so that the laser is nice and clean. What you will notice if you really get into laser cutting is if you take an image that has edges around a circle that are even the slightest bit wavy, you may not be able to see it, but when the laser cuts it, it knows, and it will actually cut the wood is a little bit wavy. So I like to use the logo, trace it, and try and create an image first, and then from there I will use the software itself to draw in new circles, squares, shapes, letters, and then use those because those are going to be designed with perfect lines, and they cut out really well that way. So in this particular case, we're going to go ahead and see if we can trace this and how it looks. As you can tell, the very first attempt, it's missing a lot of stuff. So we're going to have to make some changes. There is some ways that you can edit the image here within Lightburn and try and redo it so that it picks up some lines a little bit better. But I have found it a little bit easier to take this image, use a Photoshop software, a photo editing software, do a little bit of cleaning up there, bring it back, and then try trace that cleaned up image, and it might do something better. So let's take this out and move it over to Photoshop. In this particular case, all we have to do is remove the background, and it made a substantial difference. Now we'll take that back into Lightburn and see what happens when we trace it. Here's a way that you can actually see what I was talking about earlier. When we do the tracing and you zoom in, the letters and the lines are nowhere near perfect. You can actually use the laser to cut it, and that laser is going to cut every single wave, curve, flaw, fluke, whatever. It actually, dependent on the size that when you cut it out, you might not even notice it. So you can go ahead and use that image that was traced and see if you can cut it up, save you a bunch of time. But I'd like to make sure that I give something nice to the customer since they're paying for this. I want to make sure that it looks really good. So we're gonna actually redraw it, and we're gonna start off by putting in some new text as well. Now here's something that I found just by fluke, I think, but just about every one of the coins that I've ever worked with, or logos that I've adjusted, and when it has text, I try and find a text that the font that matches it exactly or very, very close, and that almost always the font turns out to be an Arial font. It may be Arial plain, it may be Arial bold, or oftentimes it's an Arial black, I believe it's called, which is just a bolder bold. And so using that, I'm going to go ahead and type out these same words that were on this logo. And once I get this, I'll resize the letters so that it matches the original size that were on the image that we traced. And then I use a feature from Lightburn that will allow me to take that straight font text and curve it all around the coin as it needs to be, whether it's just a small arc or a full circle all the way around the coin. It's a good feature that's available in Lightburn. So we'll go ahead and show you that. Okay, we also added some new circles to make the rings look nicer, and once we create the new rings, we overwrite it over the old ones and delete the old lines so that it has a nice clean circle. And we do this for as many images as we can. If it's something that is an unusual shape, we can use Lightburn to kind of trace. There's a feature that you can draw just straight lines. We can trace along the edges and make that nice and clean as well. Sometimes, like in this particular case, the aircraft came out really well even with the trace feature from Lightburn, so there was nothing for us to make any changes on. Once we're ready, we get this prepared so that we can cut it. Okay, before we actually start cutting on this particular project, I'd like you to go ahead and take a look at this. I've actually done a 2-inch coin version of this before, kind of as a test to let them see what I can actually do with this. Now, the original coin that I made was a 2-inch coin, which is kind of the standard original coins, challenge coins that were made. Nowadays, people make them in all different shapes and sizes, and I'm kind of a traditionalist, I guess. I like the idea of using a 1.5 or 2-inch coins. Making a 1.5-inch coin out of wood, although the laser can handle the very fine lines, the finer the line is that you're cutting out of wood, it's actually just turns into ash and dust, and so it doesn't work. So you need something that's a little bit thicker so that it holds together as a solid piece of wood that can be glued on to a base. So I have found that the 2-inch is probably the smallest that I work with. Now, when you make something like this, your original logo may be a very large logo. It could be fill up the whole screen and everything's got all the details worked out. But when you move this down to a 2-inch, all those thick lines for letters and images like the aircraft in this particular case, the lines are so thin you can't see them. The laser cuts it out and it just burns it off, and so there's nothing left over. So how do we fix this? There's a couple ways to do this, and what I have done in the past is, for example, I've had a logo that had multiple lightning bolts at the top of them, and each one of those lightning bolts, once were reduced to a 2-inch coin, were just so thin that it didn't work out. So I actually removed one of the lightning bolts, made 3 of them, and expanded them so they're all thicker, and it cut out and it worked really well. However, when you do something like that, if you're doing this as a business and a customer has requested you make this, you need to discuss it with them first. Likelihood that those 4 lightning bolts may have a significance. By changing it to 3, they may say that it's ruined the whole purpose of the logo and its meaning, so you can't do that, and you're going to have to come up with a different solution. But it may be a case of they just thought it was a cool design and went with 4, or they may be okay with you changing it down to 3. So in this case, when I did the 2-inch version of this one, the aircraft just would not work out. No matter what I tried, they were just too thin, especially on the wings. So I needed to make the aircraft larger. And without changing too much of the logo, all I did is the 2 arcs that's on the top and the bottom, I removed those, which gave more space so that I can expand the aircraft and make them larger. And once they're larger, they cut out from wood quite well. Now, today we're going to be working on a 3-inch, and so that's going to be a little bit different. Because I'm working with a 3-inch coin, I can almost make this logo an exact duplicate of the original logo when I cut it out of wood. So in this particular case, I rebuilt it and then I added the arcs on the top and bottom of the aircraft, and the aircraft is still are going to be large enough so that they can be cut from wood. I matched up the lettering and cut and made it so that I can cut it out, and let's see how it turns out. Okay, now we need to prepare this image so that we can cut it out from wood. And normally, since I'm doing in this particular case 6 of these coins, I can set them up on light burn so that they're all arranged and ready to go and cut from a single sheet of wood and get it all done all at once. However, I don't like to waste wood, so any projects that I've worked on, I actually may end up cutting out a large image from a sheet of wood, but there's always unused wood on the edges that I keep in, I guess you can call it a scrap box. It's not really scrap because it's really good wood. It's just that they're just small pieces. Now, it's not often that I'm able to get another project that I would be able to cut small things, but if I have to cut out little images or maybe letters, this is perfect to use these scrap pieces, and so I try and make use of every bit of wood that I can. In this case, I look through there and I'm just finding spaces that I can actually cut out a 3-inch circles to make this the coins. Okay, let's load the wood and get started. You may notice that I have used some painter's tape to tape down the wood. There are some products out there that you could use, magnets that's supposed to hold the wood down, but I have found that although I do have some of them, they don't hold it down exceptionally well. Why do you need to hold this down? There's a couple reasons that I can think of. One of the main reasons is a lot of times that these sheets of wood that I cut out and place on for cutting are bowed. Okay, and when they're bowed, that means that some places are going to be up higher and other places are going to be lower, but whenever the laser head comes by, if it hits one of those upper pieces that are sticking up, it moves it, and then it's ruined. You got to start all over. So that in that particular case, we want to tape it down to make sure that it stays still and doesn't get in the way of the laser head. The second reason I've come across is oftentimes that I found when cutting through the wood that I'm using, all of a sudden you get a really loud pop, almost like a small firecracker. It caught me off guard in the beginning a few times, but I'm not 100% sure what caused this. I don't know if it's hit an air pocket. I think it's more a case of there's building up pressure and heat as the laser is cutting through there, and the pressure between the wood and the honeycomb builds up and eventually bursts. Now, without the tape or some kind of magnet to hold the wood in place, what happens is the wood pops enough and it falls back down, and it's probably not going to fall back in the exact same location it was when it was being carved out from the laser. When that happens, that means that circle that it's cutting is now going to be off, and you're going to get some weird shape and you're going to have to redo it. What I found by taping it down is that even if it pops, and it still does, when it pops, the tape at least holds it in place so that it can continue to cut and there's not a problem. And now we start cutting. When I make wooden coins, I make them in 2 layers. The first layer is just the base. So in this case, we're going to make a circle base, and eventually all the letters and designs will be glued onto that. But in this particular case, I'm going to go ahead and prepare these so that I can take them outside to my little paint tent and paint them black so that they match the logo, which shows the background as black. Okay, the letters and the rings are going to be different colors based on the logo itself. I'm not going to match them perfect colors. I don't like using spray paints on these type things. I prefer to use a different type of stain, different type of colors of stains. Now, I'm not going to be able to match exact stain colors for this one, so what I tend to do is use darker and lighter shades of stains to represent the darker and lighter colors of a logo. So we're going to be using a little bit different colors for some of the parts on here. We'll stain them first, and then we're going to go ahead and attach them. Okay, now that everything is finished, we're going to go ahead and glue them all together. As you can see here, I'm only using tiny dots of glue. I'm not spreading it out. I'm really not worried about it. The only purpose that I have here is to get the glue to bind the 2 pieces together just enough to ensure that they're not going to move. because the main thing is once we're finished with the gluing, we're eventually going to be pouring epoxy in here, and the epoxy is going to bind and hold everything together, so the glue is really insignificant. And like I said, it's just there just to hold it in place. Okay, when you cut out the logo, you're going to have the spare wood that the letters and designs were cut from. Keep that, don't throw that away. Why? Because you're going to place that back into the rings itself, and it's going to serve as a template for taking the letters and dropping them right back into where the letters were cut from. You remove that template and the letters stay in place, and it looks really nice. Everything is lined up. So it's always important to keep those parts that you cut the letters and designs from. Okay, in reality, I'm really excited about this particular project because living in Hawaii, I've tried to get a hold of all these various types of epoxies that have different features, functions, and so forth, but I'm unable to get them, the types of things that I try to order through Amazon, for example. They won't ship over to Hawaii, and so I'm stuck with purchasing the epoxy from the big box stores that we have here. They usually have one brand, and it's worked really well for me. It comes out really nice, but it's very difficult to work with. It takes a lot of time, causes a lot of bubbles, and I spend a lot of time having to remove those bubbles before they solidify. This particular thing that we purchased this time is supposed to be a bubble-free version, and so we're going to give that a try. If things work out, and if it's truly a bubble-free, we should be able to pour it once, and that's it. Unlike the other ones that take 3-4 pours, popping bubbles with toothpicks, heat guns, and whatnot for days on end. It usually takes 3 to 4 days before I can get enough layers on there without any bubbles to make it look nice. So I'm kind of hoping that one layer, and we'll see how it goes. But the instructions say to start off by heating up the epoxy mix with a warm water bath. So we'll do that, and then we'll start mixing it and pour. Okay, we've combined equal parts of the epoxy mix, and start stirring. You stir for about 5 minutes, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. The idea is to make sure that there's no streaks between the two different compounds of the epoxy, and once that's done, you have to let it sit for 5 minutes more before you actually pour. Okay, 5 minutes later, and we're ready to pour. Okay, a little lesson learned here. This is actually the second try of making these 6 coins. The first ones were actually unsuccessful, and it's because I wasn't used to the epoxy. I made some mistakes on here. I've been using a heating gun for the other epoxy, and the heating gun works well to get rid of the bubbles, but it requires doing it over and over and over. I guess about every 10 minutes I go back, pop bubbles, more come out, use the heating gun, pop bubbles, more come out, and so forth. Now, I use that same process with this one here. Once I poured, I noticed some bubbles, so I immediately started using the heating gun. It got rid of some of the bubbles, but I noticed that as it was drying, it created even more bubbles. Normally, I use a heating gun and get rid of those, but it seemed that the heat from the heating gun was just causing more bubbles within the epoxy to form. So the more heat that I used, the more bubbles it caused, and it wasn't working out well. Eventually, when it dried up completely, it had too many bubbles for my liking, and it's like no way I could give this to sell this as a completed project. So I scrapped them all and started all over, and this time we're going to do something different. In reality, when working with epoxy and you want to get rid of the bubbles, the best thing to use is a blowtorch. Now, I have a blowtorch, and I used to use that on epoxy at the very beginning. It worked well, but I had noticed that people are also using heating guns, so I tried the heating gun, and since it worked, I decided to do that. I'm not super comfortable about having butane in the house or even in the garage, so I just preferred using the heating gun instead, and since it worked, I went with that. What I found here is that the heating gun doesn't work. I went out and got some more butane for my torch, and I burnt it real quick, just a matter of a fraction of a second. The bubbles disappeared and it was fantastic. Within about 10 minutes, a few more bubbles managed to come to the top, and I quickly ran over it with the torch once again, and it was gone. And when we were finished, here's how it looked. In reality, it's not done yet. It may look good on the top, but the epoxy, when you pour it, it drips over the sides, and it forms drips on the bottom. They too solidify, and so you need to remove those. Now, you could flip it over and try and remove it right away, but I wait for the epoxy to fully cure before turning it over, and I use a heat gun and a chisel to remove it. Once I'm done with that, I can use a sander and sandpaper and sand it off to make it nice and clean on the back. Normally it just really needs just a heat gun and a chisel, and you can get that really clean pretty quickly. Now, I could be done at this stage. The back doesn't look super good, but who's going to look at the back of a coin anyways? The idea is you might display it on a wall or someplace, and no one's going to see the back, so I'm not overly concerned about it. But in this particular case, for the challenge coins, I like to add magnets to the back by cutting it out from a magnet sheet, attaching it to the back, and then it becomes, I guess, a refrigerator magnet, or it can be used to put up in your office, on your file cabinets, or your cabinet, anywhere on your desk or something with metal that it sticks to. So we're going to go over to our Cricut and cut out the circles from the sheets. All right, when I cut out the circles, I don't make them exactly the same size. In this particular case, the coin is 3 inches, and I'm not going to make the magnet sheets the 3-inch circles. I'm going to do it just slightly less, maybe 95% the size. The reason being with this one here is once you cut this out exactly the same size, and when you attempt to stick it to the back of this, if it's not put on there perfect, some of the edges of the magnet's going to stick out beyond the coin, and it doesn't look as good. So just by making it, let's say 95%, it covers the vast majority of the back. Again, no one's going to see the back, especially if it's a magnet and you stick it on the wall. But it will cover a lot, and it has a lot more surface of the magnet, so it's going to stick really well. Okay, now we attach the magnets to the back. And here are the final results. Yes, it does take some time, some effort. The epoxy, if I can get this all in one shot, every time it's going to speed things up, and so far it looks like this new epoxy is going to work that way, and I'm super happy because that could cut down on my time, which normally takes about a week to get done. I could get done in several days. So I'm hoping this works like this every single time, especially with larger projects. I hope this helps you so that you have ideas on something that you can make yourself to include wood and epoxy as a plaque, as a Christmas ornament, and so forth. And as I said, share this with others, share your ideas with others, and pay it forward. Next week, we have some other projects we're working on, as well as some companies have also sent me some other things that they'd asked me to review, so we will be taking a look at one of the others of those. It's going to be still maybe another week or two, hopefully sooner, before my partner comes back. Looking forward to having her here, but I don't want to push it. We want to make sure that she's fully healed. But for now, we shall see you again. So until then, bye-bye.